You're listening to the Greeks Gridiron. Now here's your host, Ethan Haristadoulou.
Welcome back, everybody, to the Greeks Gridiron. I am Ethan Haristadoulou, and it is time again to make some picks for the UFL. We are heading into week number 5, which means we are closing up the first half of the season, nearly at the midpoint of the year. Always a bittersweet feeling because we are in the thick of things. We're having a good time, but the back half of the season is well on its way here. That being said, we got some really good matchups this week. We got ourselves another doubleheader this weekend. Not thrilled about it, but it is what it is. What can you do about the scheduling? A couple of 7 p.m. games on Saturday evening on Fox. So I invite you all, comment down below. How are you feeling so far about this season? Who do you think is coming out victorious this week coming up here? And where are you record-wise? I cannot escape 500 right now. I had that 1-3 week to start the season off. And since then, I went 3-1, 2-2, 2-2. So I've been stuck at 500 for the last 3 weeks now. And I'm hoping to get away from that in the positive side of things with some picks this week. So we'll dive in. We'll start with the very first matchup of the weekend here. We got ourselves the San Antonio Brahmas and the Arlington Renegades. Brahmas coming in at 3-1, Renegades at 0-4, hosting the Brahmas here in Arlington in a absolutely must-win situation for Arlington here, whereas San Antonio, they're coming off of a very big win last week, a much-needed one at that after losing their starting quarterback, Chase Garbers. So there's a lot going into this matchup here. When I look at Arlington, biggest question I have is just the offense. Can it get back on track against the San Antonio Brahmas defense that has one of the more devastating pass rushes in the UFL right now? The bread and butter of Arlington's offense is being able to throw the football, and if they get shut down throwing the ball, there's really not a ton of hope for them, in my opinion. And when I look at San Antonio, they come in second most sacks so far this season with 15. Protecting Luis Perez is going to be key if you have any hopes of winning this football game. And you honestly may have to try to win this game running the ball. It might be your best shot because the less pressure you can put Perez into and the more you have to keep that defense in San Antonio honest, I think the better chance you actually have. When you look at San Antonio's defense, they allow about 4.8 yards per attempt on the ground against the run. That is tied for a league high right now. So while Arlington isn't known for running the football, they're fifth in rushing yards per game. They're, and fifth in yards per attempt. You might have an opportunity to maybe do a get right game on the ground, maybe try to figure some things out. Again, there is a possibility that you can run this football a bit against San Antonio because they are so aggressive up front. So use that aggressiveness against them. Defensively, it's a bit of a matchup nightmare, and I don't really know what Arlington is going to be able to do to slow things down over there in San Antonio. San Antonio boasts 2 of 3 receivers in the UFL that have 20-plus receptions so far this season with John Trey Kirkland and Cody Latimer. I just do not know how on earth that defense is going to slow down what San Antonio is doing. I'm really looking forward to seeing how it plays out because there's a piece of me that thinks it could get really ugly, and I'm a little bit curious as to how that's going to go here. When you look at Arlington, they're allowing 13.1 yards per catch so far this season, which is in the lead by, I think, 2 yards or so. It's something along those lines. They're third most passing yards per game, third most passing touchdowns a game. It's not great. Thankfully, you found a little bit of light in the tunnel, I guess, something like that. Against Houston, you managed 3 sacks, but I don't really know how much that says considering the state that Houston has been in so far this season offensively. You're going to need to see more of that pressure this week if you want to have any shot of slowing things down with San Antonio. As for the Brahmas, I think the biggest question I have is just how far is quarterback Quentin Dormady going to take this offense here? Because I was a little concerned last week just kind of how things were going to look minus Chase Garbers. He stepped in and absolutely blew me away with nearly 270 yards and a touchdown. There is a possibility that those numbers balloon this week against this Arlington defense. I will say, though, that I would not mind seeing San Antonio maybe try to balance out the offense just a little bit and not be so one-dimensional, even with an opportunity to kind of light it up this week against Arlington. They have a big weakness over there when it comes to defending the run, and I do think that there's a good opportunity here for San Antonio to kind of figure some things out with their run game to try to balance this offense out here. I mean, Arlington is the only team right now this season allowing over 100 rushing yards per game, sitting at 109. So, I mean, if there was ever a time to try to balance out this offense a little bit more, I think it would really help in the long run, especially as we approach the back half of the season and into the playoff race. You want to be more balanced. You don't want to be one-dimensional and have defenses, especially the better ones, start to sniff you out. So this might be a good game to kind of do that and play around there. Defensively, I think it's pretty simple what you have to do, and that is just disrupt Luis Perez. And San Antonio, as the second best pass rushing team in the UFL right now, I think can very much do that. Like I said, 15 sacks so far this season. They are just as good as anybody else in the UFL in terms of disrupting quarterbacks and what they want to do. San Antonio is also good for forcing at least like one takeaway a game defensively. I think there's a really good shot that you put Perez into some really bad pressure. You can force him into a bad throw. We saw it in week 1 and in week 4. It is definitely doable. There is a good chance that we see a pretty nasty game for the Arlington Renegades against this Brahmas team. And with that, for my first pick of the week, I am leaning very heavily San Antonio Brahmas on this one. I have them winning 24-16. So take that for what you will. I don't know if I can buy the defense. And after seeing now the Arlington Renegades offense stumble and fall flat last week and what happened to them in week 1 against 2 pretty good defenses, I think there's a possibility we see some more of that this week against what I would argue is one of the best, probably tied for second, something like that, as far as defenses go in the UFL in the San Antonio Brahmas. Next matchup we're going to dive into, this is the other 7 o'clock p.m. game that we're looking at on Saturday. This one in Houston as the Birmingham Stallions head on into the Roughnecks territory to try to move on to 5-0 and complete a perfect first half of the season. For Birmingham, obviously, I think the big question here is who's going to get the start at quarterback here. Skip Holtz has been very open about wanting to allow both quarterbacks as much opportunity as possible to get game tape on. So I totally understand what he's trying to do there. Football purist in me just wants to see a singular quarterback going the entire distance, but I understand this is a league of opportunity. It's going to be what it's going to be. Last week was a little bit of a scare for Birmingham, and I do think that it maybe might have left some people just kind of wondering, just how good is this team here? But the weather definitely played an interesting factor. There was a bunch of just early mistakes. The first 3 drives were kind of a mess for Birmingham, but once they figured it out, it really felt like Birmingham was still clearly the better team here, even with DC kind of breathing down their necks and making things very close late in the game here. Even if Birmingham came out losers in that matchup, it almost felt like it would have been like Birmingham's fault that they lost as opposed to the DC defenders getting the win kind of deal. Houston's defense does pose a good challenge for them offensively, I will say that, especially running the football. Birmingham, obviously, the team's elite rushing attack, 140 yards rushing per game. They're like 30 yards ahead of the team that's in second. Houston does allow only about 70 yards per game, sitting at 69, second lowest in the league, so that will be a bit of a challenge. Can Houston manage to slow them down a little bit up front? Will they force whoever's playing quarterback to win this football game with their arm? Definitely something worth keeping an eye on there. And then defensively, there is a good shot that we just see Birmingham absolutely tee off on Houston. And I mean, the numbers don't really lie. Birmingham is averaging 4.5 sacks per game right now, which is a wild number. And then Houston allowing about 2.5 per game as well. This is kind of a matchup nightmare as far as defensive line versus offensive line is concerned here. So unless the Roughnecks just lean into Mark Thompson and try to limit just how long Reed Sinnett has the football in his hand, I'm a little bit concerned on Houston's end as to how they're going to deal with that pass rush. And then when I look at the Roughnecks, with Reed Sinnett playing, pretty well, I would say, and then running back Mark Thompson being back in the fold, we saw a little bit of hope come from this offense last week. And the question is, can they do at least as much, if not maybe a little bit more, against arguably the league's best defense? Birmingham loves to take the football away. 6 turnovers this season, so good for at least a turnover or a little bit more per game right now. Houston themselves seem to turn the football over at least once, maybe twice a football game. So definitely got to protect the football in this matchup here with 6 offensive turnovers on the season. Definitely something Houston needs to keep in mind. Protect that football. Do not put it in places it does not need to be, or if you're being tackled, you make sure you got 2 hands on the football here. On top of that, Birmingham averages the least points per game allowed this season. They're third in yards per game total altogether. They're first in rushing yards per game allowed on defense. So, I mean, there's a lot to be concerned about when you are talking about the Roughnecks and their offense going up against the Stallions defense. Houston is going to absolutely need to play their best game so far this season. Play smart with Sinnett, lean into running back Mark Thompson. He's probably going to have to run like the season depends on it, which it kind of does based on the record that they're sitting at with 1-3. And then defensively, I really think that Houston needs to try to make things as difficult as possible for Birmingham in this matchup here. Tighten up on third down. You're second worst in the UFL right now at 46.2%. As much as I would like to see the upset happen here with Houston, it's going to be a tall task, and it really is going to fall on the defense. They've got to play extremely tight, keep things in front of them. Do not let plays get behind you, because the Birmingham Stallions are just absolutely loaded with talent, and they can make you pay if you're letting things get behind you. So keep everything up front, play tight, and you got to win on third down. And that's going to be a tough task for Houston. They have one of the highest time of possessions for their opponents so far this season. So it's going to be tough. And I would love to see an upset. It would always be fun to see stuff like that happen, but I'm leaning very heavily into the Birmingham Stallions for this matchup here. I have them winning 27-18. It's another one of those situations where when you look at both these teams and just kind of where they stand right now, Houston getting a big victory over a very poor and stumbling Arlington Renegades team last week, and then the Brahmas are rolling right now going over the Renegades. First couple of games, I just look at them and I go, the favorites feel very much like the favorites and like they should come out victorious in their matchups this week. Now, moving into the second half of the weekend, we're going into Sunday now. This one, 12 p.m. Eastern time in Washington, as the Defenders host the St. Louis Battlehawks here. This is going to be tough for DC. The defense over there is not good. They are allowing a league-high 333 yards per game right now, and I don't really know if DC has it in them to slow down what the St. Louis Battlehawks have cooking over there offensively. We saw, again, DC kept the score low, but when you look at the yardage number and just the totals, it was not a great game for DC defensively against Birmingham. I feel like the final score kind of lies a little bit about what the game actually looked like. It really was just a bunch of mental errors and mistakes by Birmingham that kept that game far closer than I think it really should have been. St. Louis loves to throw the ball, and DC seems to be a big fan of letting teams throw the football here. They're tied for first in yards per game allowed to the air right now with 238, and DC has also allowed the second most passing touchdowns this season at 7 and have yet to complete an interception so far defensively. So you combine that with the fact that St. Louis has found a very serious rushing attack that can rip massive chunk plays at, it feels like, any given moment here, averaging 5.4 yards per attempt, which is almost 1 yard more than the team in second. It's going to be a tough one for DC. And then when you look at them offensively, consistency really is the key for the Defenders right now, because they're one of those teams that has a really high, like, explosive big play rate. A lot of their plays that connect go for a lot, but it's very much a very hot and cold, like 50-50 ball type of feel. Like when you look at Jordan Teamu right now, his completion percentage is sitting at like 52% right now. He is very 50-50 with how things go for him, but when they go well, they go extremely well. It is like boom or bust for this offense here. So if they could just get a little bit more consistent, take some of the easier throws for Jordan, like someone needs to tell Teamu that, like, take some of the easier throws that the defense are giving you and just emphasize on that. I do think that the Defenders offense could clean things up and be a little bit more of an effective unit. The running game is very average, I would say, at best right now as well. They just have to get more consistent offensively, and I think that this team could be a little bit more threatening here. It really is the defense that is the biggest issue, but they're 2-2 for a reason. They can rip some big plays off when they need to. It's just a matter of trying to find the consistency of getting more big plays and less of just the 3-and-outs, the plays that just go, whether it's miscommunication, dropped passes, missed throws, runs that don't go for anything. It really is just a consistency issue for them. The Battlehawks, oh boy. Well, this could be their best game of the season offensively, just matchup-wise on paper. A.J. McCarron has been arguably the most consistent quarterback so far this season, probably the most efficient as well. He is first in passing touchdowns with 8. He has the best completion percentage among starting quarterbacks currently right now with Chase Garbers out. I believe Chase Garbers is like 0.5% better completion-wise. He also only has 1 interception, so he's done a great job taking care of the ball, putting it where it needs to be. And I mean, the guy's got a litany of pass catchers with Hakeem Butler. You also have Darius Shepard, and then Ja'Cour Pearson came back and basically told everyone, I have arrived last week with his 10 receptions. You got yourself an explosive offense through the air, coupled with the fact that running back Jacob Sailors and Mateo Durant have just been unbelievable on the ground, both of them averaging 6.1 yards per attempt on the ground. There is a good chance we get ourselves some points from the St. Louis Battlehawks this weekend. I think defensively, the biggest thing for them really is just trying to generate some pressure and force Jordan Ta'amu into missing his throws and just, throwing off the rhythm of this offense. If they can do that, DC's very average at running the football. Passing attack, again, as I was saying before, basically lives and dies on boom or bust plays. There's not enough consistency there for me to really fear the DC defenders' offense against this Battlehawks defense, which has shown some improvement here. I will say they had a little bit of an up and down performance to start the season, but I think we're starting to see what they really are, and they're really good against the pass when things are going their way. First in yards per game, yards per completion, passing touchdowns allowed as well. So they've definitely figured it out. It typically seems to be teams that just find ways to run the football to keep drives alive. So if they can just kind of focus on that, I do think that they have a really good shot of coming out victorious here, and that is why I will take the St. Louis Battlehawks, and I have them winning 30-17. I really think that if St. Louis can just tighten up on defense against the pass, there's a really good shot that they hold DC down. And the way DC's defense has been set up so far this season, it's going to be a horse race. I really think that you're going to see the St. Louis Battlehawks just going up and down the field for 60 minutes here, and it's going to be a problem for DC, and I could see it kind of just taking the gas out of the offense type deal, and you get yourself a pretty ugly scoreline. So I have the Battlehawks, and I have them winning 30-17. So best of luck to DC in this one here, but the favorite's going to favorite this week, in my opinion. And then what I would say is probably the hardest game to decide on this weekend, as the Michigan Panthers at 2-2 go into Memphis to take on the Showboats, who are 1-3. I've spent a lot of time trying to decide who I think could come out victorious in this matchup here, because you have the Panthers coming in. Danny Etling is going to be seeing far more opportunity with the injury to EJ Perry. We don't necessarily know how serious it is, but it sounds like it's more serious than initially anticipated. Whether that means we're not going to see EJ Perry at all, or it's going to be more Danny Etling with EJ Perry coming in spots here or there, remains to be seen. But it sounds like, from what Mike Nolan said, there's a good shot that we see the Danny Etling show going forward, at least for now. So there's that, and then you have the Showboats coming in, and they are just kind of a mess right now, and it's really unfortunate. As I was talking in my power rankings earlier this week, they have been outscored 85-31 since the fourth quarter against the San Antonio Brahmas, and it has just not been pretty for them, both offensively or defensively. I think for the Panthers right now, the biggest thing is the offensive line. The issues for it reemerged last week after a really strong performance the week prior. They allowed 6 sacks. They had 6 different plays that were stopped for a loss. It's going to be up to Danny Etling to take advantage of Memphis's defense that has been struggling, especially now that EJ Perry is out. I think, he's going to have to match that same type of energy that EJ Perry brings with the ability. And Danny Etling is apparently more athletic than some people realize, myself included here. He is able to move with his legs a little bit, so that'll be something to keep an eye on here, but he's got to take care of the football as well. Memphis is allowing 238 yards per game, which is tied for worst right now through the air, and they've also allowed the most passing touchdowns, so there's a good opportunity that Danny Etling here doesn't necessarily have to do anything too crazy to win this football game. It's just as long as that offensive line can protect him and give him the opportunity to, deal the football as needed. I'd also like to see Michigan lean into the rushing attack this weekend here. This is one thing where I think there's way too much talent in the backfield for Michigan to not be running the football with them as much as they are. Memphis's rushing yards per game total is currently sitting at about 78 yards per game, which is third. So you think, okay, good run defense. Why would you want them to run the football? Well, I do think that number is a little bit deceiving. When you look at just kind of the overall numbers here, and I noticed this as I was going through everything, they have the league's lowest rushing attempts against them so far this season, sitting at 65. And I think part of that has to do with the fact that teams have just been able to throw the football at will. They haven't necessarily needed to run the football against them. They're also allowing a league-leading 4.8 yards per attempt. They're the team tied with the San Antonio Brahmas right now when it comes to defending against the run. So I do think there is a good opportunity. If you're worried about Danny Etling and just how he can win this football game with his arm, you have a shot to run the ball. And you have two very capable running backs. Both Matt Colburn and Wes Hills have shown that they are talented enough to be number one running backs and to be successful at that as well. I think it's the offensive line that has been giving a lot of issues for this team, or just like an unwillingness to commit to the running attack, which I get. You have a mobile quarterback and he can make things happen with his legs, but you just lost EJ Perry. I think it would be in the best interest of this offense if you try to balance out the attack a little bit more and really test what is the third-ranked run defense of the Memphis Showboats here, because again, I do think that 78 yards per game is a little bit deceiving based off the number of attempts they have against them. Michigan's defense, though, average, and I think they would need to be a little bit better in this game here, a little bit more than average if they want to come out victorious, but I do think that their biggest focus here is just trying to get the Showboats to third down. The biggest issue for Memphis this season has been getting to third down, the Michigan Panthers has been getting to third down. They are one of the best third down defenses in the UFL right now. 34.7% conversion rate, but it's just they cannot get teams to that third down spot. They have allowed the third most first downs this season, sitting at 70. So if they can just get to third down, they're a great defense when it comes to the crunch time. I do think with the struggles that we've seen from Michigan from Memphis so far this season, you have a good opportunity there. Just tighten up a little bit and you have yourself a shot. For the Showboats, my oh my, there is a lot to get into here. So first and foremost, Memphis has got to figure out a way to get to the red zone and convert red zone trips into touchdowns rather than field goals here. Memphis has only scored 6 touchdowns so far this season, as opposed to, I believe, the 9 field goals that they have this year. They're averaging just 17 points per game, good for second worst in the UFL right now. And they're very, very one-dimensional, despite having someone like running back Darius Victor, who very clearly has still got it. I think we saw some of that against the St. Louis Battlehawks last week, and there was maybe a little bit of concern about it early, but Darius Victor can run the football. He is a tank. He is a tough dude to bring down. Even if he is, 30, 31, something like that right now, he is still very capable of running the ball effectively if you give him the opportunity to do so. Last week, we saw him rip off some big plays. He had a nice 17-yard run. He finished the evening with 11 carries for 58 yards. But again, 11 carries. Let's balance out the football a little bit here. He was the lone bright spot in what was a poor offensive performance where you put up only 127 total yards of offense. Give him the ball some more. Open things up for your passing attack that has been very hit or miss so far this season. More miss, I would argue, than hit on top of that. You're third in passing attempts, but you're 7th in rushing attempts. That is very one-dimensional. It is very hard to be successful in football when everyone knows what you're doing and your passing attack isn't necessarily elite. It should be based off what you have on paper, or even at least just above average, but it's not. So you've got to balance things out offensively. On the defensive side of things, Memphis may have caught themselves a break this week. Again, with the injury situation to EJ Perry and a really poor offensive line, there is a good opportunity that Memphis maybe has a bit of a bounce back game here. And I think that there's a good opportunity that they could even upset as well, because we don't necessarily know what Danny Etling is going to give the Michigan Panthers. We don't necessarily know how this defensive front in Memphis is going to fare against that offensive line that is clearly struggling in Michigan as well. I think that if you can keep Danny Etling contained in the pocket and you can get some of the pressure that you were getting in the early portions of the season, you have an opportunity to maybe throw some things off. And the biggest thing that I really think you have to do is, one, focus on Marcus Sims. Do not let him rip you for some 60-yard touchdown, because it seems like he's doing it to defenses every single week. But the second thing is just to contain Wes Hills and Matt Colburn. I do think that we're going to see them get deployed a lot now with the injury to EJ Perry. So if you can just lock up the running backs, not allow yourself to get burned by the deep play that feels like Marcus Sims is good for every single week, you have a chance. But it's a long one in my opinion, because again, there's a lot going wrong in Memphis right now, and it's not been good at all. With that being said, as for who I think comes out victorious in this matchup here, I put a lot of thought into this one, and I feel like there is a lot to be worried about on both sides of this game right now. Big question at one of the most important positions in sports in quarterback for the Michigan Panthers, and then the Memphis Showboats, who have just been not great so far this season, since week one, essentially. And I'm leaning Michigan Panthers. I really am. And I think I'm going to go with them. I don't think this game ends up being a high-scoring affair. I think Memphis takes advantage of what Michigan is dealing with right now offensively, and I think that Michigan has an opportunity to continue to disrupt the one-dimensional issue that we're kind of seeing out of Memphis right now, and so I think it leads to a potentially lower-scoring affair. I have it 18-15 Michigan. I would not be shocked, though, to see, with Memphis being at home, maybe pulling off an upset in front of the home crowd, but this is one of those games that I'm not really sure about, to be completely honest with you. I built basically the rundown for this episode to you all yesterday, and I sat on it basically all last night and coming into this morning before recording this as to who I was going to go with for the win. So I'm going to lead Michigan on this one, but I am not by any means confident, but I'll take the Panthers here. Those are my picks going into week number 5. Again, we are approaching the midpoint of the season. Let me know in the comment section down below how you feeling about the season. Who's going to win this week? What do you think we're going to be seeing as we head into the back half of the season? Who's going to potentially make a turnaround? Things like that. Would love to hear your thoughts and opinions. But as always, if you made it to the end, I greatly appreciate it. I teased it earlier in the week. I'm going to tease it again. I've got a big announcement coming up very soon. So if you stuck around long enough to hear that, keep those eyes peeled because it's coming. Probably within the next week or so. I got a vacation coming up, so I might wait till after I get back. But there is something coming here, and there's already a hint out somewhere if you look around. So that is it for me. I'll see you all next time. Have a good one.